One Punch Man has a multiverse.
The multiverse is real.
Sounds pretty silly, I know, and some might even go as far as to say that it sounds stupid.
You stupid!
But to those people I say, hey, I'm just spitting facts, bro. There's actually hard evidence in the manga to prove this, and more importantly, the existence of a multiverse in One Punch Man might lead to truly devastating events in the near future. Events that Saitama himself might not be able to fix. A multiverse was actually confirmed by One himself in chapter 166 of the manga. In this chapter, Saitama does the unthinkable and literally uses his own power to travel back in time. He does this to prevent the world from being ruined like it had been because of Garo. In the original timeline, Garo's cosmic radiation had deleted every hero present at his arrival, and it had done irreversible damage to the Earth itself. It was pretty much GG's for everyone and everything on Earth. So once Garo teaches Saitama how to go back to undo everything, he travels back to the moment that Garo first appeared in his cosmic fear form and delivered the iconic Zero Punch, stopping the fight before it even began. In this moment, Saitama had total control over causality. It's then revealed that for a brief moment, there were two Saitamas. One was the Saitama that did the actual time traveling, you know, the super buff naked one, and the other one was from the timeline that he traveled to. Sounds kind of confusing, but don't you worry. It actually gets much more confusing from here on out, but also much more interesting. The two Saitamas merge, leaving him with no memories of anything that happened in the prior timeline, with only Genos' core as a souvenir from all the crazy things that naked Saitama just experienced. So once Saitama meets back up with Genos, who's still alive in this timeline of course, this is where the One Punch Man multiverse theory really starts to become more of a fact than a theory. Genos gains access to the data that the core obtained, which allowed him to essentially witness everything that had transpired in the doomed timeline. His own death, the fight on Io, the serious sneeze, the serious fart, everything. To try and explain how this was all possible to Saitama, he gives this super long-winded explanation that comically goes in one ear and comes out the other for Saitama, and I'm sure like 99% of the people that originally read this statement. I know on the first read, I pretty much just read the first sentence and then moved on, but the thing is though, if you read the first sentence of what he says, Genos actually reveals something crazy. The world of One Punch Man is actually infinitely bigger than we thought, a whole freaking multiverse, and this realization has some pretty heavy implications for the story as you're about to see. His first line in this long-winded explanation goes as follows. To explain briefly, consider parallel worlds. This is all speculation based on the hypothesis of the multiverse, but I suspect that this core is from one of the many world lines that an action of yours created. Essentially, Genos is trying to describe a theory that actually exists in real life, the many worlds theory or the many worlds interpretation. In simple terms, this theory states that every action performed or not performed exists in their own alternate worlds, meaning that all possible outcomes to anything that has ever existed creates its own alternate world where each possible outcome plays out. I'm sure I'm butchering the explanation a little bit because I'm not a physicist or anywhere near smart enough to be one, but there's a One Punch Man example that I came up with that helped my smooth brain understand it all. So let's say for example that Saitama is rushing to the supermarket to get in on the sale of the day before they close. About halfway there, he hits a fork in the road where he has two routes to take, his left or his right. Both take him to the supermarket, but only the left one would get him there on time. Saitama takes the left path and happily gets there just in time to catch the crab sale before they close. If we assume the many worlds theory to be true, when Saitama hit that fork in the road, the moment he decided to go left, another world existed where Saitama ended up going right, and therefore missed the sale. Every possible choice plays out in some other alternate universe, no matter what choice you make in this one. The reason I'm taking this much time to explain all of this is because it is crucial to understanding what this could potentially mean for future plot points in the story. So following this theory, at some point Saitama made a decision that created multiple world lines, just like Genos pointed out, one of them being the timeline that we witnessed in the manga, the one where everyone died. Saitama then travels back to a world line where none of that happened yet, and then takes care of business before before any of it happens. The kind of iffy part is deciding whether or not the two world lines converged and became one, or something else.
This is something else.
But thankfully that's not important to us right now. The last and probably most important line we're gonna look at here in Genos' super long explanation is when he comments on the fact that Saitama time traveled to save everybody. He says, "Garo killed me in the time from which this core originates, yet even if you held back, and no matter how near to infinity the number of existing world lines may be, Garo beating you is an impossibility. This means that no matter what happens in any other alternate world, Saitama saves everyone, and that will always be the case in this scenario, therefore making this Saitama the only absolute certainty in every possible alternate universe." But why is that important to know? That's a great question, me, and I'm gonna give you a pretty damn good answer. The reason this is so important is because now that we know there is a multiverse in One Punch Man, this gives transcendent beings like God a much bigger playground than we originally thought. It's now possible that there's either many gods in each one of these alternate universes, or a single god that can observe and influence all of them as one being. Regardless of which one it is, God has his or their eyes on Saitama. This was something that was revealed in chapter 170 when Sitch has his top secret meeting with Genos, Zombie Man, Amai Mask, and Flashy Flash. There he states, "Blast says God is intervening in this dimension more often because something is here attracting its attention." As he says this, we see an image of Saitama facing away from the panel, so it's heavily implying that Saitama is the reason why. Now, having all this multiverse stuff in mind, it's very possible that God is attracted to Saitama specifically for the very fact that he has the ability to not only transcend time and travel through the multiverse, he's also an absolute certainty and a controller of causality, someone that can always stand in the way of his evil plans for Earth, much like he did with Garo. This could all tie back to the fact that Saitama is the only known being to have removed his limiter, and therefore might be the only one that can reach the ceiling required to travel through time and the multiverse. I've referenced this in a ton of my videos by now, but it's been theorized by a lot of people that the limiter was something that was created by God himself, and then placed on humanity in order to keep them weak enough to easily control them. This is because in Dr. Genus' explanation of the limiter in chapter 88, he pretty much says it verbatim. So seeing as how Saitama is now in the crosshairs of God as a problem that needs to be dealt with at all costs, God could take it upon themselves to use their access to the multiverse as a way to get rid of Saitama, since there's currently no one on Saitama's world that can even come close to his power. With that in mind, consider this potential future arc of the story. At some point, God obtains enough power or sacrifices to fully access the multiverse at will, and even gains the ability to move beings to and from various alternate planets, basically able to teleport them back and forth. This would allow him to collect an army of fighters from all different universes who each possess an insane amount of power in their own right. And what better army than all the Saitamas from alternate universes that turned evil for one reason or another and accepted God's power. This way they'd be insanely strong, but they also never removed their limiters like our original Saitama did, so they're still not quite on his level. So to give a good example, I'm gonna have to spoil the comic book series and now animated series, but I imagine it going down a lot like the Invincible War arc of the series. In this arc, a supervillain brings in several Mark Graysons from various alternate universes where he had actually turned evil, and they wreak all sorts of havoc on the main planet. Super crazy arc, definitely one of my favorites of the entire series, but I digress. At the end of it all, the evil Saitamas would be defeated, but it would also cause an interesting dynamic where after witnessing the destructive power Saitama is capable of, the public and the majority of the Hero Association might see him as a threat. That would actually be a pretty cool thing to witness in the manga, in my opinion, as it wouldn't take much convincing for the public to turn on Saitama, since he's already seen as a fraud and a cheater by many people that don't know him. Regardless of whether that storyline ever comes to fruition though, I'm pretty damn certain that the whole time travel sequence with Garo and then Genos' long-winded explanation was pretty much a soft introduction to the concept of the multiverse that'll be played upon upon more heavily later on in the story. It's a lot like how Monster King Orochi and his monster cells were essentially a soft introduction to God and the way he's able to grant power through his cubes. Orochi's pretty much a budget version of God if you think about it, so he could have been used as a vehicle to introduce the idea that someone can obtain an insane amount of power by becoming a monster through external means, not just by mutating the old-fashioned way. The same might have been the goal with the whole time travel stuff and the explanation that Genos gave about the possibility of the multiverse, even if it was brushed off comically as an afterthought. A multiverse in One Punch Man really does open the door to an incredible amount of possibilities for the story going forward. And with that being said, I definitely want to hear your multiverse theories in the comments below. Can't wait to see what kind of crazy shit you guys come up with, but that does it for me today. I'll see you guys in the next video.